One of the biggest mistakes people make when they think about money is assuming that tomorrow will unfold exactly the way they've imagined it. We create spreadsheets, we build timelines, we map out careers, promotions, homes, and retirement goals. We convince ourselves that because something looks logical on paper, it will naturally happen in real life. But life isn't a spreadsheet. Life is messy, life throws curveballs, and sometimes the most expensive financial mistakes happen when we become overly confident about a future that hasn't happened yet. Recently, a young man found himself facing exactly this kind of crossroads. He was preparing for one of the most exciting seasons of his life. He was about to get married. He and his fiancée were talking about starting a family. The future felt bright and full of possibility. At the same time, his fiancée had been accepted into a prestigious health care program that would dramatically increase her earning potential. The opportunity looked incredible on the surface. There was only one problem. It would require taking on nearly $200,000 in student loan debt. Now, if you only looked at the numbers, it might seem like a reasonable investment. After all, the degree could potentially lead to a six-figure income. Many people would immediately say, that's worth it. But financial decisions aren't made in a vacuum. Money doesn't exist separately from life. Money is woven into relationships, marriages, children, careers, health challenges, and unexpected emergencies. And that's where people often get into trouble. When we borrow a large amount of money, we're not just making assumptions about income. We're making assumptions about everything else in life staying perfectly on track. What if the degree takes longer than expected? What if graduation doesn't happen? What if health issues arise? What if family circumstances change? What if priorities shift? What if a child enters the picture and suddenly one parent wants to stay home? Those aren't negative thoughts. They're realities. They're possibilities that deserve consideration before a major financial commitment is made. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned over the years is that flexibility has enormous value. Debt reduces flexibility. The more debt you carry, the fewer options you have when life changes. A young couple carrying no debt can adapt quickly. A young couple carrying $200,000 in student loans has far fewer choices available to them. Imagine bringing home a newborn baby. Imagine looking into that child's eyes for the very first time. Now imagine realizing that the life you suddenly want isn't the life your debt allows. That's the hidden cost of borrowing. It's not just the monthly payment, it's the pressure. It's the loss of freedom. It's the feeling of being trapped between what your heart wants and what your financial obligations demand. Many people assume that financial success is about maximizing income. In reality, financial peace is often about maximizing options, the ability to choose, the ability to pivot, the ability to respond when life changes. And life always changes, always. Anyone who has lived long enough understands this truth. There are moments when everything seems to be moving according to plan. Um, then one unexpected event changes everything. A job disappears, a diagnosis arrives, a child needs special care, a marriage struggles. An economic downturn creates uncertainty. Suddenly, the future that looked perfectly predictable becomes anything but predictable. That's why wise financial planning isn't built on best case scenarios. It's built on resilience. It's built on preparing for the unexpected. It's built on creating margin, and margin is one of the most underrated concepts in personal finance. Margin is breathing room. Margin is the difference between panic and peace. Margin is the reason some families survive difficult seasons while others feel overwhelmed by them. The challenge is that creating margin often requires saying no to things we desperately want right now, and that's hard, especially when the opportunity looks good, especially when everyone around us says it's normal, especially when society encourages us to borrow first and ask questions later. But normal isn't always wise. In fact, many financial habits that have become completely normal are quietly destroying people's futures. Credit card debt is normal. Car payments are normal. Student loans are normal. Living paycheck to paycheck is normal. Financial stress is normal. Yet, normal isn't producing peace. Normal isn't producing security. Normal isn't producing freedom. Maybe the goal shouldn't be normal. Maybe the goal should be intentional. Maybe the goal should be creating a life that isn't controlled by debt, a life where choices are made from conviction rather than obligation, a life where opportunities can be embraced because finances are stable rather than fragile. This principle applies far beyond student loans. Consider another common situation. A young couple falls in love. They begin talking about buying a home together. They aren't married yet, but they start discussing construction loans, land purchases, and future plans. Everything feels exciting. Everything feels certain. But certainty before commitment can be dangerous. One of the biggest mistakes people make is treating future possibilities as if they've already become realities. A relationship that isn't yet a marriage should not be carrying the responsibilities of a marriage. It creates confusion. It creates unnecessary risk. And it often creates complications that could have been avoided. Strong financial decisions usually follow a healthy sequence: commitment first, major financial entanglement second. The order matters, not because it's old-fashioned, not because it's traditional, because it reduces risk. When people ignore sequence, they often create unnecessary stress. And stress has a way of exposing weaknesses that were already present beneath the surface. Money doesn't create character problems. Money reveals them. That's why conversations about finances are rarely just about dollars. They're conversations about values, priorities, maturity, communication, trust, vision. Every financial decision tells a story about what we believe matters most. That's especially true in relationships. Money is one of the most powerful amplifiers in any marriage. If communication is healthy, money amplifies teamwork. If communication is unhealthy, money amplifies conflict. If trust is strong, money strengthens unity. If trust is weak, money magnifies division. That's why financial alignment matters so much before marriage. Not because couples must agree on every tiny detail, but because they need a shared direction, a shared philosophy, a shared understanding of what kind of life they're building together. Without that foundation, even large incomes can disappear into endless conflict. With that foundation, even modest incomes can create extraordinary stability. And stability is often far more valuable than people realize. Uh, in today's culture, excitement gets all the attention. Big promotions, luxury purchases, expensive vacations, dream homes, social media highlights. But stability quietly wins. Stability helps people sleep at night. Stability provides security during difficult seasons. Stability gives families the confidence to make decisions without fear. It's not flashy, but it's powerful, and it's built one decision at a time. Every choice to avoid unnecessary debt, every choice to save consistently, every choice to spend intentionally, every choice to delay gratification. Those choices may seem small in the moment, but over time, they compound into something remarkable, not just wealth, peace. And if there's one thing I've learned from observing thousands of financial journeys, it's this: peace is worth protecting far more than an extra degree, far more than a bigger house, far more than a luxury vehicle, far more than keeping up appearances. Because when peace disappears, even good opportunities begin to feel heavy. And when peace is present, even difficult seasons become manageable. The goal isn't perfection. The goal isn't having every answer. The goal isn't predicting the future perfectly. The goal is creating a financial life strong enough to withstand an uncertain future, because uncertainty isn't the exception, it's the rule. And the people who thrive financially aren't the ones who avoid uncertainty. They're the ones who prepare for it. There's another lesson hidden beneath these conversations that deserves attention. It's the difference between ownership and dependence. At first glance, this distinction seems small, but over time, it shapes nearly every aspect of financial success. Think about a young adult who has done everything right. They've avoided debt, they've saved money, they've learned a valuable trade. They're hardworking, responsible, and disciplined. On paper, they're thriving, yet they're still living comfortably at home. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. In fact, for many families, it can be a strategic season of life. The problem isn't where they live. The problem is what they might miss if they stay there too long, because there are certain lessons that can only be learned when responsibility becomes unavoidable. Something changes when you pay your own rent. Something changes when you buy your own groceries. Something changes when no one reminds you about bills, appointments, maintenance, or budgeting. Independence develops muscles that comfort cannot develop. It's not always convenient, it's not always enjoyable, but it's necessary. I've met countless people over the years who accumulated wealth. I've also met people who develop maturity. The interesting thing is that those two things don't always happen at the same time. Someone can have money without having independence. Someone can have income without having confidence. Someone can have savings without having ownership over their life. The goal isn't simply to build a bank account. The goal is to build a capable adult. And capable adults understand something that younger versions of themselves often don't. Nobody is coming to rescue them. That realization sounds harsh, but it's actually empowering. When you stop waiting for someone else to solve your problems, You begin developing the skills necessary to solve them yourself. That's where confidence comes from. Not from comfort, not from motivation, from competence. Competence creates confidence. The person who learns to manage bills becomes confident about managing money. The person who learns to solve problems becomes confident about facing challenges. The person who learns to navigate setbacks becomes confident about uncertainty. Confidence isn't something you purchase, it's something you build one decision at a time, one responsibility at a time, one challenge at a time. And perhaps that's why some of life's greatest growth occurs during seasons that feel uncomfortable. The first apartment, the first mortgage payment, the first unexpected repair, the first budget that doesn't quite work, the first financial mistake. Those experiences shape us, not because they're enjoyable, because they teach us. Far too many people spend years trying to avoid discomfort. But growth rarely happens inside comfort zones. Growth happens when we're forced to adapt, when we're forced to learn, when we're forced to take ownership. Financial works the same way. One of the most dangerous beliefs people carry is the idea that someone else will eventually solve their money problems. Maybe the government, maybe a future promotion, maybe an inheritance, maybe a spouse, maybe a lucky break, maybe a lottery ticket. The reality is much simpler. Financial progress usually comes from ordinary actions repeated consistently over long periods of time. It's not glamorous, it's not exciting, but it works. Save consistently, spend intentionally, avoid unnecessary debt, increase income, invest patiently. Repeat over and over again. The formula isn't complicated. The challenge is that it requires discipline, and discipline often feels boring compared to shortcuts. That's why so many people chase quick solutions. They want immediate transformation, immediate wealth, immediate success. But wealth is usually built slowly, very slowly. The irony is that people who try to get rich quickly often delay their success. Meanwhile, the people who focus on steady progress eventually arrive where they wanted to go. The same principle applies to business ownership. Many aspiring entrepreneurs believe success requires borrowing money. Borrowing feels like acceleration. Borrowing feels like growth. Borrowing feels like opportunity until the payments arrive, until the market changes, until customers disappear, until unexpected challenges emerge. Then suddenly the debt that once felt empowering becomes restrictive. What many successful business owners eventually discover is that cash creates options. Cash creates flexibility. Cash creates negotiating power. Cash creates peace. Debt creates pressure. Pressure changes behavior. Pressure influences decisions. Pressure causes people to accept opportunities they should reject and reject opportunities they should pursue. That's why some of the most successful entrepreneurs prefer slower growth funded by cash rather than rapid growth funded by debt. They understand something important. Control matters. When debt enters the picture, control often leaves. And once control disappears, anxiety usually arrives. I've spoken with countless individuals who looked wealthy from the outside, beautiful homes, luxury vehicles, successful businesses, impressive lifestyles. Yet beneath the surface, they were exhausted. Every decision carried pressure. Every month required per performance. Every setback felt dangerous. Why? Because debt had quietly transformed success into obligation. The appearance of wealth masked the absence of freedom, and freedom matters far more than appearances. One of the most inspiring stories I've encountered involves people who rebuild after setbacks, not because they avoided mistakes, because they learned from them. Failure doesn't automatically disqualify someone from future success. Sometimes failure becomes the foundation of future wisdom. Think about that for a moment. The people with the greatest financial insight often aren't those who never struggled. They're the ones who struggled, learned, adapted, and grew. They understand risk differently. They understand resilience differently. They understand gratitude differently because experience became their teacher. That's why I I never judge someone solely by where they are today. I pay attention to where they're headed. Direction matters more than current position. Someone moving toward financial health has reason for hope, even if they're carrying debt, even if they're recovering from mistakes, even if they're starting over. Direction changes everything. The challenge is that starting over can feel discouraging, especially after significant setbacks, a failed relationship, a business loss, a a financial mistake. Those experiences can leave people questioning themselves, questioning their decisions, questioning their future. But starting over isn't the end of the story. It's simply the beginning of a new chapter. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are people who rebuilt after loss, not because rebuilding was easy, because rebuilding revealed strengths they didn't know they possessed. Resilience often remains hidden until adversity demands it. And once discovered, it becomes one of life's greatest assets. Money can disappear, careers can change, plans can fail, but resilience remains. The ability to adapt, the ability to learn, the ability to continue moving forward. That's what creates long-term success. Not perfect circumstances, not flawless decisions, not endless good luck. Resilience. And resilience grows when people stop focusing on what they can't control and start focusing on what they can. You may not control the economy. You may not control interest rates. You may not control other people's behavior, but you can control your spending. You can control your savings. You can control your work ethic. You can control your attitude. You can control your response. Those choices matter. In fact, they matter more than most people realize because financial success is rarely one giant decision. It's thousands of small decisions compounded over time. The decision to save instead of spend, the decision to work instead of complain, the decision to learn instead of blame, the decision to take responsibility instead of making excuses. Those decisions quietly shape the future. Not overnight, but eventually. And eventually arrives faster than most people expect. One day you look around and realize your emergency fund is fully funded, your debt is gone, your investments are growing, your stress has decreased, your confidence has increased. The life that once felt impossible has become reality, not because of one dramatic breakthrough, because of consistent choices. That's the beauty of financial progress. It's available to ordinary people, not just experts, not just high income earners, not just financial professionals, ordinary people, people willing to live intentionally, people willing to delay gratification, people willing to take responsibility, people willing to keep moving forward, even when progress feels slow, especially when progress feels slow, because slow progress is still progress, and progress compounds, just like interest, just like investments, just like habits. Every positive choice strengthens the next positive choice. Every disciplined decision makes future discipline easier. Every financial victory builds momentum, and momentum is powerful, powerful to transform, powerful enough to transform marriages, powerful enough to transform generations. That's why financial wisdom matters, not because money is everything, because money influences so many things. It influences stress, it influences relationships, it influences opportunities, it influences choices. Learning to manage money well doesn't guarantee happiness, but it removes many obstacles that stand in the way of peace. And peace is a worthy goal, not perfection, not status, not comparison. Peace, the confidence that comes from knowing you're prepared, the stability that comes from knowing you're not one emergency away from disaster, the freedom that comes from knowing your decisions aren't controlled by debt. That's the kind of wealth that truly matters, and it's available to anyone willing to pursue it with patience, discipline, and purpose. Life is unpredictable. You can spend years creating the perfect plan only to watch circumstances change in a matter of weeks. A marriage that seemed stable can suddenly face challenges. A dream job can disappear. A health issue can emerge without warning. A recession can impact an industry. A family crisis can alter priorities overnight. And when those moments arrive, people discover what their financial decisions have really built. Have they built flexibility, or have they built fragility? That distinction matters more than almost anything else, because true financial strength isn't measured by the size of a paycheck. It's measured by how well your life can absorb disruption. A person earning $250,000 a year with enormous debt may appear successful. But if one interruption creates chaos, that success is fragile. Meanwhile, a family earning far less may have savings, no debt, and a clear plan. They may not look wealthy to outsiders, but they're strong, they're resilient, they're prepared, and preparation creates confidence. One of the most inspiring things I've witnessed over the years is watching ordinary people discover that they are capable of more than they imagined, not because they became financial geniuses, not because they won the lottery, not because they inherited wealth, because they made a decision to stop drifting, a decision to stop making excuses, a decision to take ownership of their future. Everything begins there. Ownership. The moment someone says, "This is my responsibility," that's the moment change becomes possible. As long as every problem belongs to someone else, solutions remain out of reach. The economy is responsible. My parents are responsible. My spouse is responsible. My employer is responsible. My circumstances are responsible. Maybe some of those things contributed. Maybe some of those things created obstacles. But ownership asks a different question. What can I do now? It's a powerful question because it shifts attention away from blame and toward action. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates progress. Progress creates hope. And hope is one of the most valuable resources a person can possess. Without hope, even small challenges feel overwhelming. With hope, even significant challenges become manageable. That's why financial transformation is about far more than numbers. At its core, it's about restoring hope, the hope that things can improve, the hope that mistakes don't have to define the future, the hope that today's circumstances aren't permanent, the hope that a different life is possible. And often that hope begins with surprisingly small decisions: a budget, a savings account, an extra job, a difficult conversation, a commitment to stop borrowing, a plan to pay off debt. Individually, those actions seem modest. Collectively, they can change an entire future. Many people underestimate the power of small decisions because they expect immediate results. But transformation rarely announces itself. It usually arrives quietly, month by month, year by year. One day you realize you're no longer worried every time the phone rings. One day you realize an unexpected bill doesn't create panic. One day you realize you're sleeping better. One day you realize you're arguing less about money. One day you realize you're looking forward to the future instead of fearing it. Those moments matter because there's evidence that your efforts are working, not perfectly, but progressively. And progress is what matters. Far too many people abandon good habits because they aren't seeing dramatic results. They expect a financial miracle. Instead, they experience gradual improvement. What they don't realize is that gradual improvement is exactly how lasting success is built. Think about investing. The most powerful force in investing isn't a single spectacular year. It's consistency, year after year, contribution after contribution, growth upon growth. Personal development works the same way. Financial health works the same way. Relationships work the same way. The greatest outcomes are often created through steady, patient effort, not dramatic breakthroughs. That's why comparison can be so dangerous. When you compare your beginning to someone else's middle, discouragement follows. When you compare your progress to someone else's highlight reel, frustration follows. The truth is that everyone is fighting battles you cannot see. Everyone is carrying burdens you may not understand. Everyone is navigating challenges that don't appear on social media, which means the only comparison that truly matters is this: are you moving forward? Are you making better decisions than you made a year ago? Are you growing? Are you learning? Are you becoming wiser? If the answer is yes, you're succeeding, even if the process feels slow, especially if the process feels slow, because sustainable success usually takes time. One of the greatest misconceptions about wealth is that money solves every problem. It doesn't. Money can remove certain pressures. Money can create opportunities. Money can provide security, but money cannot replace character. Money cannot replace wisdom. Money cannot replace healthy relationship. Money cannot replace purpose. In fact, financial success without those things often creates new problems. That's why the healthiest financial journeys focus on more than net worth. They focus on becoming the kind of person capable of handling success wisely, generous, disciplined, patient, responsible, grateful. Those qualities matter, perhaps even more than the money itself, because money comes and goes. Character remains. And character influences every financial decision we make. A disciplined person handles money differently than an impulsive person. A grateful person handles money differently than an entitled person. A patient person handles money differently than a desperate person. That's why personal growth and financial growth are so closely connected. You cannot consistently make wise financial decisions while refusing to develop wisdom. Eventually, the two become inseparable. And that's actually good news because it means financial improvement isn't reserved for a select group of people. It's available to anyone willing to grow, anyone willing to learn, anyone willing to change, no matter where they're starting, no matter how many mistakes they've made, no matter how discouraged they feel today. The future is still being written. The next chapter hasn't happened yet. And that's incredibly hopeful. Maybe you're carrying debt right now. Maybe you're rebuilding after a setback. Maybe you're facing uncertainty about your career. Maybe you're recovering from financial mistakes. Maybe you're worried about providing for your family. Maybe you're wondering whether you'll ever reach your goals. If that's you, remember this: your current circumstances are not your permanent identity. A difficult season is not a permanent destination. A mistake is not a life sentence. You are not defined by your worst financial decision. You are defined by what you choose to do next. That's where your power lives, not in the past, not in regret, not in blame, in the next decision, and then the decision after that, and then the one after that. Over time, those decisions create a story of resilience, a story of growth, a story of perseverance, a story of wisdom earned through experience, and perhaps most importantly, a story of hope, because hope is what keeps people moving. Hope is what keeps people trying. Hope is what keeps people believing that change is possible. Financial peace isn't reserved for the lucky. It's not reserved for the wealthy. It's not reserved for people with perfect circumstances. It's available to ordinary people willing to make extraordinary commitments. The commitment to live differently, the commitment to spend intentionally, the commitment to avoid unnecessary debt, the commitment to build margin, the commitment to prepare for uncertainty, the commitment to prioritize freedom over appearances. Those commitments may not always be popular. They may not always be easy, but they are worth it, because at the end of the day, financial peace is about far more than money. It's about freedom. Freedom to make choices based on values rather than obligations. Freedom to respond to life's surprises without panic. Freedom to care for the people you love. Freedom to pursue opportunities. Freedom to sleep peacefully at night. And perhaps that's the most valuable lesson of all. Life will never be perfectly predictable. The future will always contain uncertainty. Challenges will always exist. But when your financial foundation is strong, uncertainty becomes less frightening. Not because you know exactly what will happen, because you're prepared for whatever does happen. And that preparation creates something priceless. confidence, peace, and the ability to move forward with hope, regardless of what tomorrow brings. That's a future worth building, one decision at a time.